on a Sunday morning. Well, I kind of volunteered for this and then forgot that I volunteered for it. Luckily, I'd been working on something for a while, kind of like my own little project for myself. And so it's kind of what I wanted to share today, kind of see how far I've gotten so far. You know, there's a lot to this, but I believe it's important, and it touches me and it speaks to me. It concerns me and alarms me in some areas, but same time as I decided on this subject to seek out the truth. And when's the last time that you really sat down and decided that you were going to look for the truth behind something? You know, we have a lot of things that happen in our lives. And a lot of things go on in the world. And we read a lot of stuff in the Bible. And we hear a lot of stuff behind the pulpit. But when's the last time you actually sit down and something that really concerned you that was going on in the world, that you decided to actually seek what the reason behind it was? So, if you are in touch with the younger generation at all through social media, this will probably make sense to you. For everybody else, I'll explain it to you. There is a movement going around called deconstruction. And if you haven't heard of it, you need to hear about it because it's rampantly pushing people away from Christ. So I had to ask myself this question because there's these people I grew up watching. Grew up as almost kind of like an example that I wanted to run the show like they ran the show. And then getting older, we start to kind of take some of their ideals and make them our own. Then just to come to find out, they decide that they're no longer wanting to be a part of this faith anymore, this religion, this church. And they walk away from it. And let me just be honest. Can I just be honest? This might offend some people. It's our fault. And because in the beginning, let me just backtrack. In the beginning, when I first heard this, I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to use the same old excuse that everybody else is using. They were just never Christians. They just never knew God. And that's probably up there with the excuses of just pray about it when you don't want to talk about it or when you don't have an answer. Oh, just pray about it. So many people come up to me like, hey, this is going on, I don't know what to do. I'm just stuck. And instead of us actually getting into our word and looking into it and seeing what can I do to help this person, we just pray about it. Have you prayed about it yet today? We go, well, no. And it's a cop-out. Let me just be honest. It's a cop-out of having to do our job as Christians. Just pray about it. Just pray about it. Well, how do you tell somebody to pray about it that doesn't even know how to pray? How do you tell somebody, get in your word, you need to get in your word, that doesn't even know how to properly research it? Anyways, I'm going somewhere, I promise. So there's this movement going on called deconstruction. And it's funny because it's not really affecting our older generations. It's affecting my generation and a little bit, maybe a little bit past me, but not much. And then pretty much everybody after me. Okay, let me give you a couple numbers. 1985. It's a long time ago. Some of you were around then. I was not. 1985. According to statistics, according to numbers for you number people, that was the height of the approval rate for church. 1985. 2018, we've seen almost an 80% decrease for our approval rate. And I say ours because, we should keep ourselves in check, and everybody else, right? So our approval rate, we're all in it together. At least most of us are. Anyways, 80% decrease. So they decided to do this poll, and they've been running this poll since 1985. And we see that Generation Z And what is it after them? Or is it X? Is it X? Or I don't know. Anyway, I'm losing track of all the generation numbers and letters. That we have about, in Generation Z alone, we have about a 23% approval rate out of the Generation Z. And it's even less for the generation after them. Millennials were holding on to a whopping 35%. Now, we get older into generations, you see the number increase. We even get up into the 50% for some of our, baby boomers and things like that, but we're also talking about a generation that was around when the height of the church was around. They remember the glory days, right? Remember those good old days when, everybody actually attended church, and nobody disliked us. Anyways, so these are some numbers for you, okay? And you can get all these on the internet. It's pretty much a quick Google search, and you can find pretty much all you want to find. So, over the course of 20 to 30 years, the perception of Christians, all right, and the Christian church has changed drastically from respect and honor. Right now, these are not my words. These are the words of the people that they've polled. From respect and honor to an extremely cynical and apathetic feeling about Christians and their church. Some common words that they heard during this poll was, and this is from non-believers, okay? These are the people that we're supposed to be reaching. These are what they think about us. Of course, we have the traditional hypocrite. I think we'll always have that one. Okay, I can live it. Judgmental. Fake. Wow. Boring. Unloving. Unforgiving. Snobby. They don't listen. They're greedy. And you downright just can't trust them. These are not my words. I love you guys, right? I don't think that about any of you. But they think that about us. And yes, I get it. I really do. Well, I don't care about what people think about me. Okay, great. Fantastic. I'm glad you don't care about the people that you're supposed to care about. Great. Now that we got that settled, what does Jesus say? What does Jesus say about those people? Right? Great, we understand how you feel about them, but what does Jesus feel about them? What does God feel about them? Well, first of all, he calls them sons and daughters. Right? And he says he loves his children. So let's get into our word. I want to give a quick little rundown. I brought my actual, leatherback Bible today. And this is funny, I bought this after I accidentally ripped the hardcover off my other Bible. And this is probably the first time that I'm actually really breaking it in, because I've just gotten to the point where I use my phone and use my computer so often. As you can see, I use my computer up here with my notes on it. But I've seen a video, and this is going to go with it, okay? I promise. This is going along with it. I've seen a video. And it was one of the guys from King and Country. If you don't know who they are, they're a Christian band. Okay, they're pretty good. And they were just asking different questions, and they asked him something about, what's your morning routine? And he said, well, it's funny that you say that. He said, because here's my morning routine. He said, I get up before everybody. I'm up before anybody else is. He said, I usually get coffee. I make everybody breakfast. He said, about the time breakfast done, he said, everybody's getting around, getting up and stuff like that. He said, then after breakfast, he said, I go and read my word. He said, I get my word. He said, it's just a morning thing I do. He said, I make sure that I make time every morning to get in my word. He said, now mind you, and I'll demonstrate for you. He said, this was what it looked like every morning that I got into my word. Now, we can sit all day long, and if you ever have to deal with teenagers, then you're always constantly questioning if they're actually on the Bible app. But he said, I didn't realize it. He said, I always wanted my family to get in the Word. He said, I wanted my kids to get into their words. He said, that was kind of the thing. He said, so I made sure I set an example every morning to get into my word. He said, until one day it hit me, and God spoke to me and said, well, it doesn't look like you're in your word. He said, you might be in your word, but to everybody else looking at you, it doesn't look like it. And he said, now I had, he said, a leatherback, he said, Bible sitting on my nightstand. He said it had dust on it. He said, and a little notepad under it, He said, I had all that. He said, it wasn't like I didn't have a Bible, like an actual, physical copy of the Bible. He said, so one day I just decided, yeah, you're right, God. I never thought about it like that, but hey, I'm going to grab my Bible. He said, the next morning, I got up, did the same routine I always do. He said, this time, I had my Bible. He said, and I had my journal with me. And he said, and I was sitting down there journaling out some things that I was studying. He said, my son comes up to me. He said, he's about 5, I think is what he said, 5 or 6. And he comes up to me, he said, Dad, what are you doing? Now, mind you, before this, they just went about their day. To his sons, it just looked like he was on his phone. And he says, what are you doing? He said, he says, so I'm just, reading my word and journaling down some things that I read in here and that God's speaking to me. He said, I just journal it down. And he's like, oh, okay. And he walks off. He said, I don't think nothing more about it. He said about 2-3 minutes later, he said, my son walks back in with a piece of paper and a kid's Bible. He said he sits down with his little book, and he said he starts writing down. He said, I don't know what he wrote down. He said, but he started getting in his word. He said, now a lot of people crucify me, he said, because maybe I'm not in my word all the time just to be in my word. He said, but God showed me that sometimes it's not about what you're doing, but what it looks like you're doing. And I thought about that. I was like, it's crazy, because I have all my verses here, okay? I have all my verses on my notes. I have it on my phone. All right? But this morning, I grabbed my Bible. I opened up the cover like it was sitting on the floorboard of my car. And I opened it up. And I thought, you know what, today? I'm going to read out of my Bible. I'm going to read right out of the cover, of my Bible. So, let's go. If you do have your Bible today, or you have your phone, now that everybody feels guilty, we're going to go to John 13, 34 through 35. I'll give you a second to get there. I have it marked down in here so I can get there quicker than you guys. So when you're there, give me an amen. Look, my mom likes to go to this verse and then she starts reading as soon as she gets done reading the what to go to. Nobody has to, everybody's looking at me like, what are you talking about? Your mom never gives me time to get there. I'm giving you time. So let's get into it. Okay. John 13, 34 to 35 says, your love for one another will prove to the world that you are the disciples. Now I forgot 34. Let me read 34 for that. I accidentally cut up. So now I am giving you a new commandment. Now hold on. Let's break this down. He said new commandment. Okay? Not a suggestion, right? New commandment. What do we got here? So, new commandment. What's the next part? Love each other. Right? Why? Because just as I have loved you, you should love each other. 35. Go to 35 for me. Your love for one another will what? Prove. Right? Prove to the world that you are my disciples. Let me give you some more numbers here. Lifeway. If you know who Lifeway is, everybody knows Lifeway, the Bible store. Yes, they have a company. They also did their own research. After they heard about the poll from 1985 to ongoing, they decided they would do a quick research, send it out there, see what they got. So they interviewed about 1,400 people, 1,402 to be exact, that were unchurched. I like how they say unchurched. That's funny. It always makes me kind of laugh when people use unchurched as the term, because we have a lot of unchurched people in the church. These people had either never attended church or hadn't been to church in the past 6 months. Okay? That was the people they shot for. Okay? Because let's be honest. They couldn't ask us. Our opinion of the church is skewed, right? So they had to ask people on the outside looking in, right? To see all of us for who we are. So a full 72% of the people interviewed said they think the church is full of hypocrites. Okay. All right, I can probably agree with some of that. We probably got some of them in and around the churches. Okay. I don't necessarily like the word hypocrite because it's easily defendable by me, right? I can say, well, if you go into a gym, You know, are you going to be a hypocrite for all the people that are, you know, trying to work out and trying to get their life together? Probably not. But let's be honest. We can use that defense all day. There are just plain old hypocrites in church, okay? They're not trying to get their lives together. They're just there to be hypocrites. Okay, so they said it's full of hypocrites, 72%. But now listen to this, because this is where it gets interesting. Okay? Talking about unchurched. Okay? They then go on to say 71% of the 14 answered the question like this. They said, basically, what do they think about Jesus? They said that they believe Jesus makes a positive difference in a person's life. 71% of them. But 72 of them, right, of the whole, think that we're hypocrites. But 71 of the whole think that Jesus is actually good and does the right thing. So what is that telling you? Is the problem that they don't like the religion of Jesus? Or is the problem they don't like the organized church? Right? 78% said they would also be willing to listen to somebody that believed about Jesus, that believed in Christianity. So, what are we doing here? Right? Now, we can probably, some of that's probably skewed a little bit, right? We can probably say maybe not a full 78%. Some people would say just what they think you want to hear. So we can maybe give or take, okay? Let's say we just give or take. But 72%, 71, right? And 78% are too high to say less than half, right? We can probably say that it's not less than half, right? The margin that we're playing with, if we give ourselves a margin, right? So we can say more than half, if we just go more than half, think that we're hypocrites, more than half think that Jesus is a good thing, and then more than half also would be willing to listen to us about Jesus. So then why, can I get that verse back up there? Then why are there so many people running away from church? If they're willing to listen and they think God is a positive, right? So that means that we're the negative. So it brings me to this verse every time, and we're talking about this in our Wednesday night class, so for my kids that are in Wednesday night, you've seen this verse before. I'll be asking you Wednesday what I talked about Sunday. So, for your, what? Love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciple. It doesn't say, for your love for the world, or for your love for one another will prove to the world that you are a hypocrite, that you are unforgiving, that you are unloving, right? It doesn't say any of that. But my disciple. So I always ask myself the question, I mean, if you have a ministry, then you've asked yourself this question before, how do I grow my ministry? Well, how do they do it, and how do they get bigger? And of course, there's some stuff that we can kind of throw out. There's some gimmicky stuff. But for the most part, what's the difference, right? As far as what are we doing different than everybody else? What are they going to get from us that's different from what they're going to get from everybody else? Right? Now, some of you are going to combat me with saying, well, we can't conform to this world. Sure, okay. But what's conforming about just loving one another? It doesn't say anything in there for your love and acceptance for their sin will prove to the world. It says just for your love. Right? And we like to talk about the disciples a lot, right? Because we kind of chalk them up as our role models and whatnot. But it's easily proven in the Bible that they didn't have it all together. That they would fall short, sin, whatever you want to call it, right? Now, they still loved. And that's what proved that they were disciples of Jesus. Because there are plenty of people that spoke the gospel. We know this in the Bible, right? If you know the Bible, there's plenty of people that spoke the gospel of Jesus, but not all of them were actually followers of Jesus. So we'll get into a different area. Some of you might be, get a little nervous. We'll get into a different area here. So, the fix for the view of us. As simple as showing our love for one another. Now, listen to this. This doesn't mean you have to go out into the world and just start loving on everybody. Okay, look, I get we got trust and stuff like that. We don't have to just be going out, smooching on everybody and hugging everybody. And that's just weird and strange and probably will run people off. But now listen to this, because I do have a bone to pick with us. Because it says love one another. I cannot get on any form of social media, without seeing churches bickering, other believers arguing. It's like it's cutthroat out there. Like I'm nervous to put anything out there because somebody's going to start arguing with me. And I know God didn't call me to argue. But somebody's going to want to argue because they don't like your doctrine. They don't like the way you read that. They don't like the fact that you used New Living Translation. They'd rather use King James. They don't like that you speak in tongues. They don't like you do this. They don't like you do that. All right. Can we, this morning, I woke up. I was up at 3 o'clock this morning. Not for my own free will. Okay, I didn't want to be up that early. But I was up this morning at 3 o'clock. And I was sitting there, and I was waiting for some ibuprofen to kick in. Let me just be honest. Okay, I'm sitting there, and I pull up my phone, and I'm sitting there. The first thing I pull up is these two guys that I've seen. I've listened to what they said. They both speak well and are very knowledgeable in the Word, but they're arguing. You want to know what they're arguing about? It's not doctrine, if that's what you're thinking. They're arguing about how bad Sodom and Gomorrah was. One of them said that they're basically like the straw that broke the camel's back was like the sexual immorality. The other one said no, it was a bunch of other things. Okay, yeah. As a Christian, we can read that and go, okay, yeah, there was a lot of things they were doing wrong, okay? I don't know necessarily if it was sexual immorality that ended up breaking the camel's back, or it was the fact that all of them were doing it together. And this guy was like, well, they were doing it like this. And the other guy was like, no, they were doing it like this. You don't understand the Bible. You're not reading the Bible. Well, if I pull up the Greek translation, come on. Sodom and Gomorrah, bad. Pillar of salt, in the story. Let's go. What's on to the next one? We really have to get into this? It doesn't matter. The point is, it's the end of the story. We understand that Sodom and Gomorrah got destroyed, right? We both agree on that? It's not here. Why are we arguing about that? But we argue and argue and argue. Why would people want to join an organized religion that can't even get along? And don't get me wrong. I get aggravated at people. I get aggravated with people here in the church. Some of you sitting here in the pews, for sure. Certainly not any of you. No, I'm kidding. But we all get aggravated with one another. That's one thing. It's fine. Okay? We're just humans. We get aggravated, whatever. The ability to work together is different than me getting frustrated. I might get frustrated, but I'm still going to go, okay, fine. We'll do it. And I'll be right there to do it with you. Okay? That's the difference. Most of us can't push past that. I don't know if you've tried to invite any church out to any event. A lot of them, it's like crickets. All right? I don't know if you've ever had it hey, I'm going to do this event. We're doing this thing. And we invite all the churches, and the churches are like, oh, no. I'm sorry, are you Assembly of God? And I'm not picking on them. I don't ask any Assembly of God stuff. But are you this? Are you that? What is your belief? Who is that man named Ryan Sutton on your flyer? I don't know who he is. Well, if you'd come, you'd figure it out. I'm vouching for you. You know me. But we can't work together. We can't put nothing together. Now, I don't know if any of you remember this. There used to be a thing around here called Rethink. It was in Poplar Bluff. It was like a youth rally / revival thing. A lot of you are like, whoa, that's crazy. There was actually something like that in Poplar Bluff. Yes, there was. It was called Rethink. It was actually a big deal. I remember they had Tripoli. They had Toby Mack out at one point in time. They had all it was great, right? And what made it great was it was 5 or 6 different churches that were working together to just bring something to the community. Well, then they started to get bigger, right? And they started to have banners put up, right? They started to actually have to advertise, right? Well, then the question is, whose church name gets to be put on the banner? Ooh. We're constantly worried whether or not people will attend or come to an event that's held at our church because it's not their church. So, I believe that verse, the love you have for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples, I believe is less about them and more about us. Right? Don't get me wrong, I think we should love, other people. I think we should love outside of our walls, but I think that if we can't get along here, like if we can't pull together and do something awesome because we're working together, then, how do we expect to make a difference out there? So, one last statistic before we move on. I'm coming in fast for a close, I promise. So, I gave you that 1985 to 2018, another statistic. That 80% approval rate was also asked the same question of what was different. What was different about 1985 to 2018, right? Now, mind you, we've continued to decrease after 2018. We haven't gone up, okay? Okay. All right? So what was the difference? What happened in 1985 to 2018? Well, they said that the 80% disapproval rate was because that church dropped out of their community. So the community presence for churches was 80% higher in 1985, right, than it was in 2018. We see a drop-off in our involvement into the community. This isn't just political. They said local community. They said reaching out to local shelters and things like that to help supply stuff. That basically the church has withdrawn themselves. Right? 80% decrease. We're to the point where we're almost non-existent. And for any of you that have been around for a while, and I remember when I was a child, when I was a kid, that my mom had a youth group. What was that church? Word of God? Was it Word of God? Word of God. That youth group was awesome. Okay? I remember that youth group, and I was little, all right? But they did some awesome stuff. But I think what drove me the most and what was in my mind my whole life was when I join youth, I want my youth group to be like that. That's what I want. And so people are why do you want that? Because they were like a family. They didn't do hardly anything, and Sherry can probably answer, they didn't do hardly anything without together. They did everything together. They would hang out together. It was a family. Their involvement was it just fit. And they did stuff, they would go out and do stuff in the community. They would play games in the community. They would do the scavenger hunts. They would have church members dress up. I think this one was in River of Life. They would dress up, they had church members dress up like different strangers, and then send them out into Walmart, and the youth had to go find them. So that was pretty, funny thing. Can't do that now because you'll get shot. But, it was cool. Man, how far have we fallen from our community presence? Back then, it wasn't unusual to see churches doing things. Now it's holy cow, that's crazy. We went to go eat at China Garden, and there was two guys standing up for a China Garden. You're just when people are handing stuff out, you're ooh. You're on your phone trying to make sure they don't look at you. And they're here you go. And they handed me one, they handed one. And we're oh, thank you. And they're hey, we're with such and such church. We just want to make sure that you have a good lunch. Lunch is on us today. And they were handing these vouchers out for free meals from China Garden. They were just paying for people's meals. And we sat down. I think that's all we talked about. That was we read it. We read their pamphlet. We read everything about them. And our meal was paid for, free. Boom. I've never seen anybody else do anything like that. I've never seen anybody do that in the last, I've been on 28 now. The last probably 10 years, I've never seen anybody do something like that. Any event is at somebody's church. Any community favor is at somebody's church. Oh, you need food? Come to the church. Oh, you need toys for Christmas? Come to the church. I'm sorry, I'm going off here. I need to get back. Sorry. So you can see I'm frustrated. I'm a little bit frustrated at us. Okay. Ooh, sorry. I'm getting all flustered. Galatians 6:2. All right. I have it marked here. It's really short, so I'm just going to read it. Don't worry about pulling it up. Galatians 6, verse 2 says, share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. Well, hold on. I'm going to go ahead and read 3. If you think you are too important to help someone, you are only fooling yourself. And this line says, you are not that important. You are not that important. I'm sorry. Yeah, look, you are not that important. See, I wasn't lying. It's there. The TV says so. Man, isn't that crazy? Share each other's burdens. You know why? Burdens. You know, I use an analogy. I use a bunch of analogies Wednesday. But one of them used is that we don't wake up with the drive and want to sin. If that makes sense. You don't just wake up one day and decide, you know what, I'm going to be addicted to alcohol. One day you wake up, I'm going to be addicted to drugs today, I think. I'm going to be, I'm going to be a homosexual today. We don't do this. Everything derives from something. I have a huge binder of things that was handed down to me from my mom when she did youth. And I only ever used one thing out of it because all of it was outdated. It's like from the 80s. No, I'm kidding. It's not that old. She ain't here to defend herself, so I can say whatever I want. I only used one thing out of it, though. And it was outdated. I mean, come on, let's be honest. It was outdated. It's like from the 90s. I used one thing out of it, and it was a tree. It was this tree. And, of course, it had the second level and it had roots. And for every root that was down past past the dirt, had a reason listed on of why what you're doing has grown into a tree. And is any possible one of these roots that started the tree that's growing in your life? So can I get that up one more time? So when it says share each other's burdens, this isn't like, oh, hey, you need a car ride. Let me give you a ride. Even though that's good, let me help you reach the top shelf. It's not that kind of stuff. It's like, let me share what you're going through. Let me help. Let me be there. Those people that are that we call addicts and that we call delusional, their problem started somewheres. Their addiction started somewheres. And the only reason why it metastasized to the way it did was because there was not somebody there to share the burden. Because we missed it as a church. Go to 3. Go ahead and go to 3. Yeah, thank you. If you think you are too important, listen, the church thinks we're way higher than we really are. Can I just be honest? Man, we think we're up on this like pedestal. Hey, we go to church. We worship Almighty God, the Alpha and the Omega, the yesterday and today and the future. Like, that's the God we worship, and that's awesome and everything. But like, it really is like, this is like a hospital. And I know we've heard this all the time. This is like a hospital to us. We're not here because we have it together. We're here because we don't. Because we fall short. Because we're seeking help. We're trying to find something that helps us carry the burden. Now, that's why we're here. That's why it's important for people to come to church. Do I believe you have to be in a physical building in order to go to heaven? Absolutely not. I don't even believe that there'll be a building that we worship Jesus in heaven. I think it's going to be like a huge giant field. How the heck are you going to fit everybody in one building in heaven? So I think we're going to be really, really surprised for the people that like to stay indoors when we're outside worshiping in heaven, and there's no building to go into. But exactly. Absolutely, I agree with that 100%. What I'm saying is that we have a generation that is running away from God. Let me rephrase that. We have a generation that is running away from organized church. Because 71% of them said that Jesus is good. That doesn't sound like people that are against Jesus. It doesn't sound like what the media is portraying to you. Can I just be honest? Like, a lot of us are like, hey, we're hated and we're persecuted, but in reality, like, it's like 1 to 4% of like the really far left that we like to ag on. It's like 1 to 4% of them. And yeah, don't get me wrong, it's like a couple million. But like the point is like that's not a lot. And we focus on them and we focus on their hate for us. And so we're missing the 1,400 people that just said that Jesus was great. But they just didn't like organized church. So I guess for me, what I want to say here is we have to figure out what we need to do so that people look at us differently. Because we don't have a good view in the eyes of the public. We have half of our churches that are just conforming, that are literally conforming to whatever they need to conform as long as they get people that show up. Then we have the other half that hate everybody. That hate everybody. If they're not like in church and they're not, they don't believe like this, and then if you don't believe exactly how I believe, then you're going to hell. All right, we've had people tell us that we're going to hell. I don't know if you know that. This church, apparently. For what? I don't know. Anyways, the point I want to make is that we can't seem to figure it out. But Jesus, plain as day, puts it in the Bible. Love one another. That's not how big is your church, how big is your ministry, how many people fill your pews, how loud is the music, how soft is the music, how many lights do you have? I like lights. How big is your TV there? How big is your youth ministry, your children's ministry? Do you have comfy seats or do you have hard seats? It's none of that. It's as simple as love one another. And because you love one another, people then will know that you are my disciples.